Section 17 of Letters of Pliny by Pliny the Younger, translated by William Melmoth, revised by F.C.T. Bosanquet. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 17. Part II. Correspondence with the Emperor Trajan. Letters 1 to 27. Letter 1. To the Emperor Trajan. The pious affection you bore, most sacred Emperor, to your august father, induced you to wish it might be late ere you succeeded him. But the immortal gods thought proper to hasten the advancement of those virtues to the helm of the commonwealth, which had already shared in the steerage. May you then, and the world through your means, enjoy every prosperity worthy of your reign, to which let me add my wishes, most excellent Emperor, upon a private as well as public account, that your health and spirits may be preserved firm and unbroken. Letter 2. To the Emperor Trajan. You have occasioned me, Sir, an inexpressible pleasure in deeming me worthy of enjoying the privilege which the laws confer on those who have 3 children. For although it was from an indulgence to the request of the excellent Julius Servianus, your own most devoted servant, that you granted this favour, yet I have the satisfaction to find by the words of your rescript that you complied the more willingly as his application was in my behalf. I cannot but look upon myself as in possession of my utmost wish, after having thus received, at the beginning of your most auspicious reign, so distinguishing a mark of your peculiar favour, at the same time that it considerably heightens my desire of leaving a family behind me. I was not entirely without this desire even in the late most unhappy times, as my 2 marriages will induce you to believe; but the gods decreed it better, by reserving every valuable privilege to the bounty of your generous dispensations. And indeed the pleasure of being a father will be so much more acceptable to me now, that I can enjoy it in full security and happiness. Letter 3. To the Emperor Trajan. The experience, most excellent Emperor, I have had of your unbounded generosity to me in my own person, encourages me to hope I may be yet further obliged to it in that of my friends. Voconius Romanus, who was my schoolfellow and companion from our earliest years, claims the first rank in that number; in consequence of which I petitioned your sacred father to promote him to the dignity of the senatorial order. But the completion of my request is reserved to your goodness; for his mother had not then advanced, in the manner the law directs, the liberal gift of 400,000 sesterces, which she engaged to give him in her letter to the late emperor your father. This, however, by my advice, she has since done, having made over certain estates to him, as well as completed every other act necessary to make the conveyance valid. The difficulties therefore being removed which deferred the gratification of our wishes, it is with full confidence I venture to assure you of the worth of my friend Romanus, heightened and adorned as it is not only by liberal culture, but by his extraordinary tenderness to his parents as well. It is to that virtue he owes the present liberality of his mother, as well as his immediate succession to his late father's estate, and his adoption by his father-in-law. To these personal qualifications, the wealth and rank of his family give additional lustre, and I persuade myself it will be some further recommendation that I solicit in his behalf. Let me then entreat you, Sir, to enable me to congratulate Romanus on so desirable an occasion, and at the same time to indulge an eager and, I hope, laudable ambition of having it in my power to boast that your favourable regards are extended not only to myself, but also to my friend. IV To the Emperor Trajan. When by your gracious indulgence, Sir, I was appointed to preside at the treasury of Saturn, I immediately renounced all engagements of the bar, as indeed I never blended business of that kind with the functions of the state, that no avocations might call off my attention from the post to which I was appointed. For this reason, when the province of Africa petitioned the senate that I might undertake their cause against Marius Priscus, I excused myself from that office, and my excuse was allowed. But when afterwards the consul elect proposed that the senate should apply to us again, and endeavour to prevail with us to yield to its inclinations, and suffer our names to be thrown into the urn, I thought it most agreeable to that tranquillity and good order which so happily distinguishes your times not to oppose, especially in so reasonable an instance, the will of that august assembly. And, as I am desirous that all my words and actions may receive the sanction of your exemplary virtue, I hope you approve of my compliance. V Trajan to Pliny. You acted as became a good citizen and a worthy senator, by paying obedience to the just requisition of that august assembly; and I have full confidence you will faithfully discharge the business you have undertaken. VI To the Emperor Trajan. Having been attacked last year by a very severe and dangerous illness, I employed a physician, whose care and diligence, Sir, I cannot sufficiently reward, but by your gracious assistance. I entreat you therefore to make him a denizen of Rome; for as he is the freedman of a foreign lady, he is, consequently, himself also a foreigner. His name is Harpocras. His patroness, who has been dead a considerable time, was Thermuthis, the daughter of Theon. I further entreat you to bestow the full privileges of a Roman citizen upon Hegia and Antonia Harmaris, the freedwomen of Antonia Maximilla, a lady of great merit. It is at her desire I make this request. VII To the Emperor Trajan. I return you thanks, Sir, for your ready compliance with my desire in granting the complete privileges of a Roman to the freedwomen of a lady to whom I am allied, and also for making Harpocras, my physician, a denizen of Rome. But when, agreeably to your directions, I gave in an account of his age and estate, I was informed by those who are better skilled in the affairs than I pretend to be, that, as he is an Egyptian, I ought first to have obtained for him the freedom of Alexandria, before he was made free of Rome. Indeed, as I was ignorant of any difference in this case between those of Egypt and other countries, I contented myself with only acquainting you that he had been manumitted by a foreign lady long since deceased. However, it is an ignorance I cannot regret, since it affords me an opportunity of receiving from you a double obligation in favour of the same person. That I may legally, therefore, enjoy the benefit of your goodness, I beg you would be pleased to grant him the freedom of the city of Alexandria, as well as that of Rome; and that your gracious intentions may not meet with any further obstacles, I have taken care, as you directed, to send an account to your freedman of his age and possessions. VIII Trajan to Pliny. It is my resolution, in pursuance of the maxim observed by the princes my predecessors, to be extremely cautious in granting the freedom of the city of Alexandria. However, since you have obtained of me the freedom of Rome for your physician Harpocras, I cannot refuse you this other request. You must let me know to what district he belongs, that I may give you a letter to my friend Pompeius Planta, governor of Egypt. IX. To the Emperor Trajan. I cannot express, Sir, the pleasure your letter gave me, by which I am informed that you have made my physician Harpocras a denizen of Alexandria, notwithstanding your resolution to follow the maxim of your predecessors in this point, by being extremely cautious in granting that privilege. Agreeably to your directions, I acquaint you that Harpocras belongs to the district of Memphis. I entreat you then, most gracious Emperor, to send me, as you promised, a letter to your friend Pompeius Planta, governor of Egypt, as I purpose, in order to have the earliest enjoyment of your presence so ardently wished for here, to come to meet you. I beg, Sir, you would permit me to extend my journey as far as possible. X. To the Emperor Trajan. I was greatly obliged, Sir, in my late illness, to Posthumius Marinus, my physician, and I cannot make him a suitable return, but by the assistance of your wonted gracious indulgence. I entreat you then to make Chrysippus Mithridates, and his wife Stratonica, who are related to Marinus, denizens of Rome. I entreat likewise the same privilege in favour of Epigonus and Mithridates, the two sons of Chrysippus, but with this restriction, that they may remain under the dominion of their father, and yet reserve their right of patronage over their own freedmen. I further entreat you to grant the full privileges of a Roman to Lucius Satrius Abascantius, Publius Caesius Phosphorus, and Pancharius Soteris. This request I make with the consent of their patrons. XI. To the Emperor Trajan. After your late sacred father, Sir, had, in a noble speech as well as by his own generous example, exhorted and encouraged the public to acts of munificence, I implored his permission to remove the several statues which I had of the former emperors to my corporation, and at the same time requested permission to add his own to the number. For as I had hitherto let them remain in the respective places in which they stood when they were left to me by several different inheritances, they were dispersed in distant parts of my estate. He was pleased to grant my request, and at the same time to give me a very ample testimony of his approbation. I immediately therefore wrote to the Decurii to desire they would allot a piece of ground upon which I might build a temple at my own expense, and they, as a mark of honour to my design, offered me the choice of any site I might think proper. However, my own ill health in the first place, and later that of your father, together with the duties of that employment which you were both pleased to entrust me, prevented my proceeding with that design; but I have now, I think, a convenient opportunity of making an excursion for the purpose, as my monthly attendances ends on the 1st of September, and there are several festivals in the month following. My first request, then, is that you would permit me to adorn the temple I am going to erect with your statue, and next, in order to the execution of my design with all the expedition possible, that you would indulge me with leave of absence. It would ill become the sincerity I profess were I to dissemble that your goodness in complying with this desire will at the same time be extremely serviceable to me in my own private affairs. It is absolutely necessary I should not defer any longer the letting of my lands in that province; for besides that they amount to above 400,000 sesterces, the time for dressing the vineyards is approaching, and that business must fall upon my new tenants. The unfruitfulness of the seasons besides, for several years past, obliges me to think of making some abatements in my rents, which I cannot possibly settle unless I am present. I shall be indebted then to your indulgence, Sir, for the expedition of my work of piety, and the settlement of my own private affairs, if you will be pleased to grant me leave of absence for 30 days. I cannot give myself a shorter time, as the town and the estate of which I am speaking lie above 150 miles from Rome. XII. Trajan to Pliny. You have given me many private reasons, and every public one, why you desire leave of absence; but I need no other than that it is your desire, and I doubt not of your returning as soon as possible to the duty of an office which so much requires your attendance. As I would not seem to check any instance of your affection towards me, I shall not oppose your erecting my statue in the place you desire, though in general I am extremely cautious in giving any encouragement to honours of that kind. XIII. To the Emperor Trajan. As I am sensible, Sir, that the highest applause my actions can receive is to be distinguished by so excellent a prince, I beg you would be graciously pleased to add either the office of Augur or Septemvir, both which are now vacant, to the dignity I already enjoy by your indulgence, that I may have the satisfaction of publicly offering up those vows for your prosperity, from the duty of my office, which I daily prefer to the gods in private, from the affection of my heart. XIV. To the Emperor Trajan. Having safely passed the promontory of Malea, I am arrived at Ephesus with all my retinue, notwithstanding I was detained for some time by contrary winds; a piece of information, Sir, in which, I trust, you will feel yourself concerned. I propose pursuing the remainder of my journey to the province, partly in light vessels, and partly in post chaises; for as the excessive heats will prevent my travelling altogether by land, so the Etesian winds, which are now set in, will not permit me to proceed entirely by sea. XV. Trajan to Pliny. Your information, my dear Pliny, was extremely agreeable to me, as it does concern me to know in what manner you arrive at your province. It is a wise intention of yours to travel either by sea or land, as you shall find most convenient. XVI. To the Emperor Trajan. As I had a very favourable voyage to Ephesus, so in travelling by post chaise from thence I was extremely troubled by the heats, and also by some slight feverish attacks, which kept me some time at Pergamus. From there, Sir, I got on board a coasting vessel, but being again detained by contrary winds, did not arrive at Bithynia so soon as I had hoped. However, I have no reason to complain of this delay, since (which indeed was the most auspicious circumstance that could attend me) I reached the province in time to celebrate your birthday. I am at present engaged in examining the finances of the Prusenses, their expenses, revenues, and credits; and the further I proceed in this work, the more I am convinced of the necessity of my enquiry. Several large sums of money are owing to the city from private persons, which they neglect to pay upon various pretences; as, on the other hand, I find the public funds are, in some instances, very unwarrantably applied. This, Sir, I write to you immediately on my arrival. I entered this province on the 17th of September, and found in it that obedience and loyalty towards yourself which you justly merit from all mankind. You will consider, Sir, whether it would not be proper to send a surveyor here; for I am inclined to think much might be deducted from what is charged by those who have the conduct of the public works, if a faithful admeasurement were to be taken. At least, I am of that opinion from what I have already seen of the accounts of this city, which I am now going into as fully as is possible. XVII. Trajan to Pliny. I should have rejoiced to have heard that you arrived at Bithynia without the smallest inconvenience to yourself or any of your retinue, and that your journey from Ephesus had been as easy as your voyage to that place was favourable. For the rest, your letter informs me, my dearest Secundus, on what day you reached Bithynia. The people of that province will be convinced, I persuade myself, that I am attentive to their interest; as your conduct towards them will make it manifest that I could have chosen no more proper person to supply my place. The examination of the public accounts ought certainly to be your first employment, as they are evidently in great disorder. I have scarcely surveyors sufficient to inspect those works which I am carrying on at Rome and in the neighbourhood; but persons of integrity and skill in this art may be found most certainly in every province, so that they will not fail you if only you will make due enquiry. XVIII To the Emperor Trajan. Though I am well assured, Sir, that you, who never omit any opportunity of exerting your generosity, are not unmindful of the request I lately made to you, yet, as you have often indulged me in this manner, give me leave to remind and earnestly entreat you to bestow the praetorship now vacant upon Attius Sura. Though his ambition is extremely moderate, yet the quality of his birth, the inflexible integrity he has preserved in a very narrow fortune, and more than all, the felicity of your times, which encourages conscious virtue to claim your favour, induce him to hope he may experience it in the present instance. XIX To the Emperor Trajan. I congratulate both you and the public, most excellent Emperor, upon the great and glorious victory you have obtained, so agreeable to the heroism of ancient Rome. May the immortal gods grant the same happy success to all your designs, that, under the administration of so many princely virtues, the splendour of the empire may shine out, not only in its former, but with additional lustre. XX To the Emperor Trajan. My lieutenant Servilius Pudens came to Nicomedia, Sir, on the 24th of November, and by his arrival freed me, at length, from the anxiety of a very uneasy expectation. XXI To the Emperor Trajan. Your generosity to me, Sir, was the occasion of uniting me to Rosianus Geminus by the strongest ties, for he was my quaestor when I was consul. His behaviour to me during the continuance of our offices was highly respectful, and he has treated me ever since with so peculiar a regard that, besides the many obligations I owe him upon a public account, I am indebted to him for the strongest pledges of private friendship. I entreat you, then, to comply with my request for the advancement of one whom, if my recommendation has any weight, you will even distinguish with your particular favour, and whatever trust you shall repose in him, he will endeavour to show himself still deserving of an higher. But I am the more sparing in my praises of him, being persuaded his integrity, his probity, and his vigilance are well known to you, not only from those high posts which he has exercised in Rome within your immediate inspection, but from his behaviour when he served under you in the army. One thing, however, my affection for him inclines me to think I have not yet sufficiently done, and therefore, Sir, I repeat my entreaties that you will give me the pleasure, as early as possible, of rejoicing in the advancement of my quaestor, or, in other words, of receiving an addition to my own honours in the person of my friend. XXII To the Emperor Trajan. It is not easy, Sir, to express the joy I received when I heard you had, in compliance with the request of my mother-in-law and myself, granted Coelius Clemens the proconsulship of this province after the expiration of his consular office. As it is from thence I learn the full extent of your goodness towards me, which thus graciously extends itself through my whole family. As I dare not pretend to make an equal return to those obligations I so justly owe you, I can only have recourse to vows, and ardently implore the gods that I may not be found unworthy of those favours which you are the repeatedly conferring upon me. XXIII To the Emperor Trajan. I received, Sir, a dispatch from your freedman Lycormas, desiring me, if any embassy from Bosporus should come here on the way to Rome, that I would detain it till his arrival. None has yet arrived, at least in the city where I now am; but a courier passing through this place from the king of Sarmatia, I embrace the opportunity which accidentally offers itself of sending with him the messenger which Lycormas dispatched hither, that you might be informed by both their letters of what, perhaps, it may be expedient you should be acquainted with at one and the same time. XXIV To the Emperor Trajan. I am informed by a letter from the king of Sarmatia that there are certain affairs of which you ought to be informed as soon as possible. In order, therefore, to hasten the dispatches which his courier was charged with to you, I granted him an order to make use of the public post. XXV To the Emperor Trajan. The ambassador from the king of Sarmatia having remained 2 days, by his own choice, at Nicea, I did not think it reasonable, Sir, to detain him any longer; because, in the first place, it was still uncertain when your freedman Lycormas would arrive, and then again some indispensable affairs require my presence in a different part of the province. Of this I thought it necessary that you should be informed, because I lately acquainted you in a letter that Lycormas had desired, if any embassy should come this way from Bosporus, that I would detain it till his arrival. But I saw no plausible pretext for keeping him back any longer, especially as the dispatches from Lycormas, which, as I mentioned before, I was not willing to detain, would probably reach you some days sooner than this ambassador. XXVI To the Emperor Trajan. I received a letter, Sir, from Apuleius, a military man, belonging to the garrison at Nicomedia, informing me that one Calidromus, being arrested by Maximus and Dionysius, 2 bakers to whom he had hired himself, fled for refuge to your statue; that, being brought before a magistrate, he declared he was formerly slave to Liberius Maximus, but being taken prisoner by Susagus in Moesia, he was sent as a present from Decebalus to Pacorus, king of Parthia, in whose service he continued several years, from whence he made his escape, and came to Nicomedia. When he was examined before me, he confirmed this account, for which reason I thought it necessary to send him to you. This I should have done sooner, but I delayed his journey in order to make an enquiry concerning a seal ring, which he said was taken from him, upon which was engraven the figure of Pacorus in his royal robes. I was desirous, if it could have been found, of transmitting this curiosity to you, with a small gold nugget which he says he brought from out of the Parthian mines. I have affixed my seal to it, the impression of which is a chariot drawn by 4 horses. XXVII To the Emperor Trajan. Your freedman and procurator Maximus behaved, Sir, during all the time we were together, with great probity, attention, and diligence, as one strongly attached to your interest and strictly observant of discipline. This testimony I willingly give him, and I give it with all the fidelity I owe you. Section 18 of Letters of Pliny by Pliny the Younger, translated by William Melmoth, revised by F.C.T. Bosanquet. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrew Coleman. Correspondence with Trajan. Letters 28 to 51. XXVIII To the Emperor Trajan. After having experienced, Sir, in Gabius Bassus, who commands on the Pontic coast, the greatest integrity, honour, and diligence, as well as the most particular respect to myself, I cannot refuse him my best wishes and suffrage, and I give them to him with all that fidelity which is due to you. I have found him abundantly qualified by having served in the army under you, and it is owing to the advantages of your discipline that he has learned to merit your favour. The soldiery and the people here, who have had full experience of his justice and humanity, rival each other in that glorious testimony they give of his conduct, both in public and in private, and I certify this with all the sincerity you have a right to expect from me. XXIX To the Emperor Trajan. Nymphidius Lupus, Sir, and myself served in the army together. He commanded a body of the auxiliary forces at the same time that I was military tribune, and it was from thence my affection for him began. A long acquaintance has since mutually endeared and strengthened our friendship. For this reason I did violence to his repose, and insisted upon his attending me into Bithynia as my assessor in council. He most readily granted me this proof of his friendship, and without any regard to the plea of age, or the ease of retirement, he shared, and continues to share with me, the fatigue of public business. I consider his relations therefore as my own, in which number Nymphidius Lupus, his son, claims my particular regard. He is a youth of great merit and indefatigable application, and in every respect well worthy of so excellent a father. The early proof he gave of his merit, when he commanded a regiment of foot, shows him to be equal to any honour you may think proper to confer upon him; and it gained him the strongest testimony of approbation from those most illustrious personages, Julius Ferox and Fuscus Salinator. And I will add, Sir, that I shall rejoice in any accession of dignity which he shall receive as an occasion of particular satisfaction to myself. XXX To the Emperor Trajan. I beg your determination, Sir, on a point I am exceedingly doubtful about. It is whether I should place the public slaves as sentries round the prisons of the several cities in this province, as has been hitherto the practice, or employ a party of soldiers for that purpose. On the one hand, I am afraid the public slaves will not attend this duty with the fidelity they ought; and on the other, that it will engage too large a body of the soldiery. In the meanwhile, I have joined a few of the latter with the former. I am apprehensive, however, there may be some danger that this method will occasion a general neglect of duty, as it will afford them a mutual opportunity of throwing the blame upon each other. XXXI Trajan to Pliny. There is no occasion, my dearest Secundus, to draw off any soldiers in order to guard the prisons. Let us rather persevere in the ancient customs observed in this province, of employing the public slaves for that purpose, and the fidelity with which they shall execute their duty will depend much upon your care and strict discipline. It is greatly to be feared, as you observe, if the soldiers should be mixed with the public slaves, they will mutually trust to each other, and by that means grow so much the more negligent. But my principal objection is that as few soldiers as possible should be withdrawn from their standard. XXXII To the Emperor Trajan. Gabius Bassus, who commands upon the frontiers of Pontica, in a manner suitable to the respect and duty which he owes you, came to me, and has been with me, Sir, for several days. As far as I could observe, he is a person of great merit, and worthy of your favour. I acquainted him it was your order that he should retain only 10 beneficiary soldiers, 2 horse guards, and 1 centurion out of the troops which you were pleased to assign to my command. He assured me those would not be sufficient, and that he would write to you accordingly, for which reason I thought it proper not immediately to recall his supernumeraries. XXXIII Trajan to Pliny. I have received from Gabius Bassus the letter you mention, acquainting me that the number of soldiers I had ordered him was not sufficient; and for your information I have directed my answer to be hereunto annexed. it is very material to distinguish between what the exigency of affairs requires, and what an ambitious desire of extending power may think necessary. As for ourselves, the public welfare must be our only guide. Accordingly, it is incumbent upon us to take all possible care that the soldiers shall not be absent from their standard. XXXIV To the Emperor Trajan. The Prusenses, Sir, having an ancient bath which lies in a ruinous state, desire your leave to repair it; but, upon examination, I am of opinion it ought to be rebuilt. I think, therefore, you may indulge them in this request, as there will be a sufficient fund for that purpose, partly from those debts which are due from private persons to the public, which I am now collecting in, and partly from what they raise among themselves towards furnishing the bath with oil, which they are willing to apply to the carrying on of this building; a work which the dignity of the city and the splendour of your times seem to demand. XXXV Trajan to Pliny. If the erecting a public bath will not be too great a charge upon the Prusenses, we may comply with their request, provided, however, that no new tax be levied for this purpose, nor any of those taken off which are appropriated to necessary services. XXXVI To the Emperor Trajan. I am assured, Sir, by your freedman and receiver General Maximus, that it is necessary he should have a party of soldiers assigned to him, over and besides the beneficiarii, which by your orders I allotted to the very worthy Gemellinus. Those therefore which I found in his service I thought proper he should retain, especially as he was going into Paphlagonia in order to procure corn. For his better protection likewise, and because it was his request, I added 2 of the cavalry. But I beg you would inform me, in your next despatches, what method you would have me observe for the future in points of this nature. XXXVII Trajan to Pliny. As my freedman Maximus was going upon an extraordinary commission to procure corn, I approve of your having supplied him with a file of soldiers. But when he shall return to the duties of his former post, I think 2 from you, and as many from his coadjutor, my receiver General Viridius Gemellinus, will be sufficient. XXXVIII To the Emperor Trajan. The very excellent young man Sempronius Caelianus, having discovered 2 slaves among the recruits, has sent them to me; but I deferred passing sentence till I had consulted you, the restorer and upholder of military discipline, concerning the punishment proper to be inflicted upon them. My principal doubt is that, whether, although they have taken the military oath, they are yet entered into any particular legion. I request you therefore, Sir, to inform me what course I should pursue in this affair, especially as it concerns example. XXXIX Trajan to Pliny. Sempronius Caelianus has acted agreeably to my orders in sending such persons to be tried before you as appear to deserve capital punishment. It is material, however, in the case in question, to enquire whether these slaves enlisted themselves voluntarily, or were chosen by the officers, or presented as substitutes for others. If they were chosen, the officer is guilty; if they are substitutes, the blame rests with those who deputed them; but if, conscious of the legal inabilities of their station, they presented themselves voluntarily, the punishment must fall upon their own heads. That they are not yet entered into any legion makes no great difference in their case, for they ought to have given a true account of themselves immediately upon their being approved as fit for the service. XL To the Emperor Trajan. As I have your permission, Sir, to address myself to you in all my doubts, you will not consider it beneath your dignity to descend to those humbler affairs which concern my administration of this province. I find there are in several cities, particularly those of Nicomedia and Nicea, certain persons who take upon themselves to act as public slaves, and receive an annual stipend accordingly, notwithstanding they have been condemned either to the mines, the public games, or other punishments of the like nature. Having received information of this abuse, I have been long debating with myself what I ought to do: on the one hand, to send them back again to their respective punishments, many of them being now grown old, and behaving, as I am assured, with sobriety and modesty, would, I thought, be proceeding against them too severely; on the other, to retain convicted criminals in the public service seemed not altogether decent. I considered at the same time to support these people in idleness would be an useless expense to the public, and to leave them to starve would be dangerous. I was obliged, therefore, to suspend the determination of this matter till I could consult with you. You will be desirous, perhaps, to be informed how it happened that these persons escaped the punishments to which they were condemned. This enquiry I have also made, but cannot return you any satisfactory answer. The decrees against them were indeed produced, but no record appears of their having ever been reversed. It was asserted, however, that these people were pardoned upon their petition to the proconsuls, or their lieutenants, which seems likely to be the truth, as it is improbable any person would have dared to set them at liberty without authority. XLI Trajan to Pliny. You will remember you were sent into Bithynia for the particular purpose of correcting those many abuses which appeared in need of reform. Now none stands more so than that of criminals who have been sentenced to punishment should not only be set at liberty, as your letter informs me, without authority, but even appointed to employments which ought only to be exercised by persons whose characters are irreproachable. Those therefore among them who have been convicted within these 10 years, and whose sentence has not been reversed by proper authority, must be sent back again to their respective punishments. But where more than 10 years have elapsed since their conviction, and they are grown old and infirm, let them be disposed of in such employments as are but few degrees removed from the punishments to which they were sentenced, that is, either to attend upon the public baths, cleanse the common sewers, or repair the streets and highways, the usual offices assigned to such persons. XLII To the Emperor Trajan. While I was making a progress in a different part of the province, a most extensive fire broke out at Nicomedia, which not only consumed several private houses, but also 2 public buildings, the town house and the temple of Isis, though they stood on contrary sides of the street. The occasion of its spreading thus far was partly owing to the violence of the wind, and partly to the indolence of the people, who, manifestly, stood idle and motionless spectators of this terrible calamity. The truth is, the city was not furnished with either engines, buckets, or any single instrument suitable for extinguishing fires, which I have now, however, given directions to have prepared. You will consider, Sir, whether it may not be advisable to institute a company of firemen, consisting only of 150 members. I will take care none but those of that business shall be admitted into it, and that the privileges granted them shall not be applied to any other purpose. As this corporate body will be restricted to so small a number of members, it will be easy to keep them under proper regulation. XLIII Trajan to Pliny. You are of opinion it would be proper to establish a company of firemen in Nicomedia, agreeably to what has been practised in several other cities. But it is to be remembered that societies of this sort have greatly disturbed the peace of the province in general, and of those cities in particular. Whatever name we give them, and for whatever purposes they may be founded, they will not fail to form themselves into factious assemblies, however short their meetings may be. It will therefore be safer to provide such machines as are of service in extinguishing fires, enjoining the owners of houses to assist in preventing the mischief from spreading, and, if it should be necessary, to call in the aid of the populace. XLIV To the Emperor Trajan. We have acquitted, Sir, and renewed our annual vows for your prosperity, in which that of the empire is essentially involved, imploring the gods to grant us ever thus to pay, and thus to repeat them. XLV Trajan to Pliny. I received the satisfaction, my dearest Secundus, of being informed by your letter that you, together with the people under your government, have both discharged and renewed your vows to the immortal gods for my health and happiness. XLVI To the Emperor Trajan. The citizens of Nicomedia, Sir, have expended 3,329 sesterces in building an aqueduct; but, not being able to finish it, the works are entirely falling to ruin. They made a second attempt in another place, where they laid out 2 millions; but this likewise is discontinued, so that, after having been at an immense charge to no purpose, they must still be at a further expense, in order to be accommodated with water. I have examined a fine spring from whence the water may be conveyed over arches, as was attempted in their first design, in such a manner that the higher, as well as level and low parts of the city may be supplied. There are still remaining a very few of the old arches; and the square stones, however, employed in the former building may be used in turning the new arches. I am of opinion part should be raised with brick, as that will be the easier and cheaper material; but that this work may not meet with the same ill success as the former, it will be necessary to send here an architect, or some one skilled in the construction of this kind of waterworks; and I will venture to say, from the beauty and usefulness of the design, it will be an erection well worthy the splendour of your times. XLVII Trajan to Pliny. Care must be taken to supply the city of Nicomedia with water; and that business, I am well persuaded, you will perform with all the diligence you ought. But really it is no less incumbent upon you to examine by whose misconduct it has happened that such large sums have been thrown away upon this, lest they apply the money to private purposes, and the aqueduct in question, like the preceding, should be begun, and afterwards left unfinished. You will let me know the result of your enquiry. XLVIII To the Emperor Trajan. The citizens of Nicea, Sir, are building a theatre, which, though it is not yet finished, has already exhausted, as I am informed, for I have not examined the account myself, above 10 millions of sesterces; and, what is worse, I fear to no purpose; for either from the foundation being laid in soft marshy ground, or that the stone itself is light and crumbling, the walls are sinking, and cracked from top to bottom. It deserves your consideration, therefore, whether it would be best to carry on this work, or entirely discontinue it, or rather, perhaps, whether it would not be most prudent absolutely to destroy it; for the buttresses and foundations by means of which it is from time to time kept up appear to me more expensive than solid. Several private persons have undertaken to build the compartment of this theatre at their own expense, some engaging to erect the portico, others the galleries over the pit; but this design cannot be executed, as the principal building which ought first to be completed is now at a stand. This city is also rebuilding, upon a far more enlarged plan, the gymnasium, which was burnt down before my arrival in the province. They have already been at some, and I rather fear a fruitless, expense. The structure is not only irregular and ill proportioned, but the present architect, who it must be owned is a rival to the person who was first employed, asserts that the walls, although 22 feet in thickness, are not strong enough to support the superstructure, as the interstices are filled up with quarry stones, and the walls are not overlaid with brickwork. Also the inhabitants of Claudiopolis are sinking (I cannot call it erecting) a large public bath, upon a low spot of ground which lies at the foot of a mountain. The fund appropriated for the carrying on of this work arises from the money which those honorary members you were pleased to add to the senate paid, or at least are ready to pay whenever I call upon them, for their admission. As I am afraid, therefore, the public money in the city of Nicea, and, what is infinitely more valuable than any pecuniary consideration, your bounty in that of Nicopolis, should be ill applied, I must desire you to send hither an architect to inspect, not only the theatre, but the bath, in order to consider whether, after all the expense which has already been laid out, it will be better to finish them upon the present plan, or alter the one and remove the other, in as far as may seem necessary; for otherwise we may perhaps throw away our future cost in endeavouring not to lose what we have already expended. XLIX TRAJAN to Pliny. You, who are upon the spot, will best be able to consider and determine what is proper to be done concerning the theatre which the inhabitants of Nicea are building. As for myself, it will be sufficient if you let me know your determination. With respect to the particular parts of this theatre which are to be raised at a private charge, you will see those engagements fulfilled when the body of the building to which they are to be annexed shall be finished. These paltry Greeks are, I know, immoderately fond of gymnastic diversions, and therefore perhaps the citizens of Nicea have planned a more magnificent building for this purpose than is necessary. However, they must be content with such as will be sufficient to answer the purpose for which it is intended. I leave it entirely to you to persuade the Claudiopolitani as you shall think proper with regard to their bath, which they have placed, it seems, in a very improper situation. As there is no province that is not furnished with men of skill and ingenuity, you cannot possibly want architects, unless you think it the shortest way to procure them from Rome, when it is generally from Greece that they come to us. L. To the Emperor Trajan. When I reflect upon the splendour of your exalted station and the magnanimity of your spirit, nothing, I am persuaded, can be more suitable to both than to point out to you such works as are worthy of your glorious and immortal name, as being no less useful than magnificent. Bordering upon the territories of the city of Nicomedia is a most extensive lake, over which marbles, fruits, woods, and all kinds of materials, the commodities of the country, are brought over in boats up to the high road, at little trouble and expense, but from thence are conveyed in carriages to the seaside, at a much greater charge, and with great labour. To remedy this inconvenience, many hands will be in request; but upon such an occasion they cannot be wanting, for the country, and particularly the city, is exceedingly populous, and one may assuredly hope that every person will readily engage in a work which will be of universal benefit. It only remains then to send hither, if you shall think proper, a surveyor or an architect, in order to examine whether the lake lies above the level of the sea, the engineers of this province being of opinion that the former is higher by 40 cubits. I find there is in the neighbourhood of this place a large canal, which was cut by a king of this country; but as it is left unfinished, it is uncertain whether it was for the purpose of draining the adjacent fields, or making a communication between the lake and the river. It is equally doubtful too whether the death of the king, or the despair of being able to accomplish the design, prevented the completion of it. If this was the reason, I am so much the more eager and warmly desirous, for the sake of your illustrious character (and I hope you will pardon me the ambition), that you may have the glory of executing what kings could only attempt. LI. Trajan to Pliny. There is something in the scheme you propose of opening a communication between the lake and the sea, which may, perhaps, tempt me to consent. But you must first carefully examine the situation of this body of water, what quantity it contains, and from whence it is supplied; lest, by giving it an opening into the sea, it should be totally drained. You may apply to Calpurnius Macer for an engineer, and I will also send you from hence some one skilled in works of this nature. Section 19 of Letters of Pliny by Pliny the Younger, translated by William Melmoth, revised by F.C.T. Bosanquet. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrew Coleman. Section 19. Letters 52 to 70. Letter 52. To the Emperor Trajan. Upon examining into the public expenses of the city of Byzantium, which I find are extremely great, I was informed, Sir, that the appointments of the ambassador whom they send yearly to you with their homage, and the decree which passes in the senate upon that occasion, amount to 12,000 sesterces. But knowing the generous maxims of your government, I thought proper to send the decree without the ambassador, that, at the same time they discharge their public duty to you, their expense incurred in the manner of paying it might be lightened. This city is likewise taxed with the sum of 3,000 sesterces, towards defraying the expense of an envoy, whom they annually send to compliment the governor of Moesia. This expense I have also directed to be spared. I beg, Sir, you would deign either to confirm my judgment, or correct my error in these points, by acquainting me with your sentiments. Letter 53. Trajan to Pliny. I entirely approve, my dearest Secundus, of your having excused the Byzantines that expense of 12,000 sesterces in sending an ambassador to me. I shall esteem their duty as sufficiently paid, though I only receive the act of their senate through your hands. The governor of Moesia must likewise excuse them if they compliment him at a less expense. Letter 54. To the Emperor Trajan. I beg, Sir, you would settle a doubt I have concerning your diplomas, whether you think proper that those diplomas the dates of which are expired shall continue in force, and for how long; for I am apprehensive I may, through ignorance, either confirm such of these instruments as are illegal, or prevent the effect of those which are necessary. Letter 55. Trajan to Pliny. The diplomas whose dates are expired must by no means be made use of; for which reason it is an inviolable rule with me to send new instruments of this kind into all the provinces before they are immediately wanted. LVI. To the Emperor Trajan. Upon intimating, Sir, my intention to the city of Apamea of examining into the state of their public dues, their revenue and expenses, they told me they were all extremely willing I should inspect their accounts, but that no proconsul had ever yet looked them over, as they had a privilege, and that of a very ancient date, of administering the affairs of their corporation in the manner they thought proper. I required them to draw up a memorial of what they then asserted, which I transmit to you precisely as I received it, though I am sensible it contains several things foreign to the question. I beg you will deign to instruct me as to how I am to act in this affair, for I should be extremely sorry either to exceed or fall short of the duties of my commission. LVII Trajan to Pliny. The memorial of the Apennines annexed to your letter has saved me the necessity of considering the reasons they suggest why the former proconsuls forbore to inspect their accounts, since they are willing to submit them to your examination. Their honest compliance deserves to be rewarded, and they may be assured the enquiry you are to make in pursuance of my orders shall be with a full reserve to their privileges. LVIII To the Emperor Trajan. The Nicomedeans, Sir, before my arrival in this province, had begun to build a new forum adjoining their former, in a corner of which stands an ancient temple dedicated to the mother of the gods. This fabric must either be repaired or removed, and for this reason chiefly, because it is a much lower building than that very lofty one which is now in process of erection. Upon inquiry whether this temple had been consecrated, I was informed that their ceremonies of dedication differ from ours. You will be pleased, therefore, Sir, to consider whether a temple which has not been consecrated according to our rites may be removed, consistently with the reverence due to religion; for, if there should be no objection from that quarter, the removal in every other respect would be extremely convenient. LIX Trajan to Pliny. You may without scruple, my dearest Secundus, if the situation requires it, remove the temple of the mother of the gods, from the place where it now stands to any other spot more convenient. You need be under no difficulty with respect to the act of dedication, for the ground of a foreign city is not capable of receiving that kind of consecration which is sanctified by our laws. LX To the Emperor Trajan. We have celebrated, Sir, with those sentiments of joy your virtues so justly merit, the day of your accession to the empire, which was also its preservation, imploring the gods to preserve you in health and prosperity. For upon your welfare the security and repose of the world depends. I renewed at the same time the oath of allegiance at the head of the army, which repeated it after me in the usual form, the people of the province zealously concurring in the same oath. LXI Trajan to Pliny. Your letter, my dearest Secundus, was extremely acceptable, as it informed me of the zeal and affection with which you, together with the army and the provincials, solemnised the day of my accession to the empire. LXII To the Emperor Trajan. The debts which we are owing to the public are, by the prudence, Sir, of your counsels, and the care of my administration, either actually paid in, or now being collected; but I am afraid the money must lie unemployed: for as on one side there are few or no opportunities of purchasing land, so, on the other, one cannot meet with any person who is willing to borrow of the public, especially at 12 per cent interest, when they can raise money upon the same terms from private sources. You will consider then, Sir, whether it may not be advisable, in order to invite responsible persons to take this money, to lower the interest; or if that scheme should not succeed, to place it in the hands of the decurii, upon their giving sufficient security to the public; and though they should not be willing to receive it, yet as the rate of interest will be diminished, the hardship will be so much the less. LXIII TRAJAN to Pliny. I agree with you, my dear Pliny, that there seems to be no other method of facilitating the placing out of the public money than by lowering the interest, the measure of which you will determine according to the number of the borrowers. But to compel persons to receive it, who are not disposed to do so, when possibly they themselves may have no opportunity of employing it, is by no means consistent with the justice of my government. LXIV To the Emperor Trajan. I return you my warmest acknowledgments, Sir, that, among the many important occupations in which you are engaged, you have condescended to be my guide on those points on which I have consulted you, a favour which I must now again beseech you to grant me. A certain person presented himself with a complaint that his adversaries, who had been banished for 3 years by the illustrious Servilius Calvus, still remained in the province. They, on the contrary, affirmed that Calvus had revoked their sentence, and produced his edict to that effect. I thought it necessary, therefore, to refer the whole affair to you; for as I have your express orders not to restore any person who has been sentenced to banishment either by myself or others, so I have no directions with respect to those who, having been banished by some of my predecessors in this government, have by them also been restored. It is necessary for me, therefore, to beg you would inform me, Sir, how I am to act with regard to the above mentioned persons, as well as others, who, after having been condemned to perpetual banishment, have been found in the province without permission to return; for cases of that nature have likewise fallen under my cognizance. A person was brought before me who had been sentenced to perpetual exile by the proconsul Julius Bassus; but knowing that the acts of Bassus, during his administration, had been rescinded, and that the senate had granted leave to all those who had fallen under his condemnation of appealing from his decision at any time within the space of 2 years, I enquired of this man whether he had, accordingly, stated his case to the proconsul. He replied he had not. I beg then you would inform me whether you would have him sent back into exile, or whether you think some more severe, and what kind of punishment should be inflicted upon him, and such others who may hereafter be found under the same circumstances. I have annexed to my letter the decree of Calvus, and the edict by which the persons above mentioned were restored, as also the decree of Bassus. LXV TRAJAN to Pliny. I will let you know my determination concerning those exiles which were banished for 3 years by the proconsul Publius Servilius Calvus, and soon afterwards restored to the province by his edict, when I shall have informed myself from him of the reasons of this proceeding. With respect to that person who was sentenced to perpetual banishment by Julius Bassus, yet continued to remain in the province, without making his appeal if he thought himself aggrieved, though he had 2 years given him for that purpose, I would have sent in chains to my praetorian prefects; for, only to remand him back to a punishment which he has contumaciously eluded will by no means be a sufficient punishment. LXVI To the Emperor Trajan. When I cited the judges, Sir, to attend me at a sessions which I was going to hold, Flavius Archippus claimed the privilege of being excused as exercising the profession of a philosopher. It was alleged by some who were present that he ought not only to be excused from that office, but even struck out of the rolls of judges, and remanded back to the punishment from which he had escaped by breaking his chains. At the same time a sentence of the proconsul Vellius Paulus was read, by which it appeared that Archippus had been condemned to the mines for forgery. He had nothing to produce in proof of this sentence having ever been reversed. He alleged, however, in favour of his restitution, a petition which he presented to Domitian, together with a letter from that prince and a decree of the Prusensians in his honour. To these he subjoined a letter which he had received from you, as also an edict and a letter of your august father confirming the grants which had been made to him by Domitian. For these reasons, notwithstanding crimes of so atrocious a nature were laid to his charge, I did not think proper to determine anything concerning him, without first consulting with you, as it is an affair which seems to merit your particular decision. I have transmitted to you with this letter the several allegations on both sides. Domitian's letter to Terentius Maximus. Flavius Archippus the philosopher has prevailed with me to give an order that 600,000 sesterces be laid out in the purchase of an estate for the support of him and his family, in the neighbourhood of Prusias, his native country. Let this be accordingly done, and place that sum to the account of my benefactions. From the same to Lucius Appius Maximus. I recommend, my dear Maximus, to your protection that worthy philosopher Archippus, a person whose moral conduct is agreeable to the principles of the philosophy he professes, and I would have you pay entire regard to whatever he shall reasonably request. The edict of the Emperor Nerva. There are some points, no doubt, Quirites, concerning which the happy tenor of my government is a sufficient indication of my sentiments; and a good prince need not give an express declaration in matters wherein his intention cannot but be clearly understood. Every citizen in the empire will bear me witness that I gave up my private repose to the security of the public, and in order that I might have the pleasure of dispensing new bounties of my own, as also of confirming those which have been granted by predecessors. But lest the memory of him who conferred these grants, or the diffidence of those who received them, should occasion any interruption to the public joy, I thought it as necessary as it is agreeable to me to obviate these suspicions by assuring them of my indulgence. I do not wish any man who has obtained a private or a public privilege from one of the former emperors to imagine he is to be deprived of such a privilege, merely that he may owe the restoration of it to me; nor need any who have received the gratifications of imperial favour petition me to have them confirmed. Rather let them leave me at leisure for conferring new grants, under the assurance that I am only to be solicited for those bounties which have not already been obtained, and which the happier fortune of the empire has put it in my power to bestow. From the same to Tullius Justus. Since I have publicly decreed that all acts begun and accomplished in former reigns should be confirmed, the letters of Domitian must remain valid. LXVII To the Emperor Trajan. Flavius Archippus has conjured me, by all my vows for your prosperity and by your immortal glory, that I would transmit to you the memorial which he presented to me. I could not refuse a request couched in such terms. However, I acquainted the prosecutrix with this my intention, from whom I have also received a memorial on her part. I have annexed them both to this letter, that by hearing, as it were, each party, you may the better be enabled to decide. LXVIII Trajan to Pliny. It is possible that Domitian might have been ignorant of the circumstances in which Archippus was when he wrote the letter so much to that philosopher's credit. However, it is more agreeable to my disposition to suppose that prince designed he should be restored to his former situation, especially since he so often had the honour of a statue decreed to him by those who could not be ignorant of the sentence pronounced against him by the proconsul Paulus. But I do not mean to intimate, my dear Pliny, that if any new charge should be brought against him, you should be the less disposed to hear his accusers. I have examined the memorial of his prosecutrix Fura Prima, as well as that of Archippus himself, which you sent with your last letter. LXIX To the Emperor Trajan. The apprehensions you express, Sir, that the lake will be in danger of being entirely drained if a communication should be opened between that and the sea by means of the river, are agreeable to that prudence and forethought you so eminently possess; but I think I have found a method to obviate that inconvenience. A channel may be cut from the lake up to the river so as not quite to join them, leaving just a narrow strip of land between, preserving the lake. By this means it will not only be kept quite separate from the river, but all the same purposes will be answered as if they were united; for it will be extremely easy to convey over that little intervening ridge whatever goods shall be brought down by the canal. This is a scheme which may be pursued, if it should be found necessary; but I hope there will be no occasion to have recourse to it: for, in the first place, the lake itself is pretty deep; and in the next, by damming up the river which runs from it on the opposite side, and turning its course as we shall find expedient, the same quantity of water may be retained. Besides, there are several brooks near the place where it is proposed the channel should be cut, which, if skilfully collected, will supply the lake with water in proportion to what it shall discharge. But if you should rather approve of the channel's being extended further and cut narrower, and so conveyed directly into the sea, without running into the river, the reflux of the tide will return whatever it receives from the lake. After all, if the nature of the place should not admit of any of these schemes, the course of the water may be checked by sluices. These, however, and many other particulars, will be more skilfully examined into by the engineer, whom indeed, Sir, you ought to send, according to your promise, for it is an enterprise well worthy of your attention and magnificence. In the meanwhile I have written to the illustrious Calpurnius Macer, in pursuance of your orders, to send me the most skilful engineer to be had. LXX Trajan to Pliny. It is evident, my dearest Secundus, that neither your prudence nor your care has been wanting in this affair of the lake, since, in order to render it of more general benefit, you have provided so many expedients against the danger of its being drained. I leave it to your own choice to pursue whichever of the schemes shall be thought most proper. Calpurnius Macer will furnish you, no doubt, with an engineer, as artificers of that kind are not wanting in his province. Section 19.